Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy, Social Security Disability Claims. I'm going to be walking through some theoretical applicants to see whether or not you understand the concepts regarding disability, the definition of disability. Don't be surprised if you get the answer wrong, because this is a learning process. But again, we're doing this exercise so that you understand the Social Security disability claims process and how Social Security goes about making a decision as to whether or not you're entitled to your Social Security disability benefits. Ready? Okay. Applicant number one. She's a 61-year-old hairdresser. She's worked all of her life self-employed. She never had FICAs withheld from her paycheck. Now, she's limited to sedentary sit-down work because of a back surgery and a failed total hip replacement. Is she entitled to Social Security disability benefits? Well, the key here is what I said about not withholding, having FICAs withheld from her paycheck. She hasn't contributed to the Social Security system, and she's not insured for Social Security purposes. Now, as a rule, and depending on your age, you generally will have had to have worked 20 out of the last 40 quarters to be insured for Social Security purposes. So one of the first questions that you're going to be asked by any person you contact, including our law firm, is going to be, when did you last work and what jobs did you hold in the 5 years before you became disabled? And generally we ask 10 years because, again, we're trying to discern whether or not the person has worked 20 out of 40 quarters. Sometimes we don't get an answer that's clear to us. And so we will ask the person who's calling us to contact the local Social Security office to find out what's their date last insured. Now, that's a term of art, and that's what we're asking for. What's the date you were last insured? Because you have to prove that you were disabled before your date last insured status expires. And you can lose that insured status when you stop work and stop making contributions. So in our particular example, number one, while she may be disabled under Social Security rules or regulations, she would never be eligible for the benefits because she had never made a contribution and she had no insured status. Let's talk about applicant two, who's a 50-year-old housewife. She hasn't worked in the last 5 years. She stayed home to raise her children. She's got fibromyalgia with body-wide pain, fibro fog. She sleeps 16 hours a day. Is she entitled to Social Security disability benefits? Now, you should know the answer to that one based on our first example. And the answer is no, because she is not insured for Social Security disability purposes. However, she might be entitled to Supplemental Security Income, SSI, if she meets the applicable asset and income limitations for SSI. And I will be discussing SSI and those requirements in upcoming episodes with a special guest. Applicant number three, a systems engineer for Verizon, 50 years old, high school education. He's worked for Verizon for 20 years as a systems engineer, which is a position that requires him to sit all day and have bilateral manual dexterity doing keyboarding. He has a cervical neck fusion and has tingling and numbness in his hands. Now, he went back to work in 10 months. Is he entitled to Social Security? Well, the answer is it sounds like he's insured, but he went back to work in 10 months and he wasn't disabled for at least 1 year. So he won't be eligible for his Social Security disability benefits. Example number four, a doctor. Now, this doctor has been practicing medicine for 15 years, 45 years old. He was involved in a motorcycle accident, in fact, and that resulted in an amputation of his right leg. Now, because of complications with the stump, he has difficulty using a prosthetic device, and he can't stand for more than 30 minutes at a time. And he does use a cane, but when he goes, for example, to the grocery store, he has to use an electric cart and use hand controls on his car. Now, is he entitled to Social Security disability benefits? And you would think, well, he's a doctor. He should be able to go back to work and do some other stuff. Well, the answer is yes, he is entitled to Social Security because he meets what's called a listing at step 3, which involves, in part, an amputation. And we're going to talk about the 5-step sequential evaluation and listings at step 3. Let's talk about applicant number 5. She's a housekeeper. She's 61 years old. She's worked as a housekeeper for the last 10 years. And in the past, she worked as a phone solicitor. She has a high school education, and she's limited to sedentary work because of back, knees, and hip problems. So the question is she entitled to her benefits? And the answer would have been no, because up until recently, Social Security has looked at a work history going back 15 years. And because she had worked as a phone solicitor, which is a position where you sit, Social Security would have said, no, you're not entitled to benefits because you can go back to your past work. But because of the change, because we're only looking back 5 years now, she could not probably go back to work as a housekeeper because that's a job that requires her to stand. How about applicant 6, an auto repair person? 50-year-old auto repair person, done heavy lifting of equipment and car parts, high school education. He's limited, to sedentary work because of a cardiac condition. Is he entitled to Social Security? The answer is probably yes, because he can't, at step 4, go back to his past relevant work. And he doesn't have any skills that he can take to other work. And he potentially is going to grid out. Alternatively, if he doesn't grid out, he probably can't do sedentary work because of problems with shortness of breath, the need to take a nap, and he would be absent at least 2 days per month. So he would be disabled probably at step 5, which is an inability to go to do other work in the mythical, hypothetical, not real world national economy in view of a person's age, education, and skills. And we're going to talk about this in greater detail. The last example that I gave you, or the example I gave you at step 3, we'll talk about the listings. We're going to talk about step 4, past relevant work. And of course, we're going to talk about step 5, which is this mythical, hypothetical work in the national economy in view of your age, education, and skills. And I'm hammering this right now because these 3 areas are really where cases are decided. So let's see if we can apply this. Applicant number 7, a nurse. She's a critical care nurse for 30 years. She has long COVID with pulmonary complications, neurological complications, and fatigue issues. She's limited to sedentary work, but in the course of her employment as a nurse, she's done case management work, which is sedentary in nature. So is she entitled to her benefits? She probably can't go back to work as a critical care nurse because that requires standing, moving patients, lifting things. And so while she can't do the past work as a critical care nurse, the case is going to be decided at step 5. And step 5 is, can you do other work in the mythical, hypothetical, not real world national economy in view of your age, education, skills, and whatever your restrictions are? Now, what's key here is going to be developing the restrictions, because many times the key to winning a claim is what are your functional, physical, cognitive, and psychological restrictions and limitations. If, for example, she has difficulty sitting, standing, has difficulty because she has to alternate sitting and standing, if she has problems because of fatigue, has difficulty concentrating, those are the kinds of things would limit her ability to do a sedentary job. And that's the key here. Because ultimately at step 5, it comes down, in my view, to a person's ability to do a sedentary job with bilateral manual dexterity, in other words, using both of your hands, and meeting the pace, production, and attendance requirements. Now, just because you may not have problems with your upper extremities doesn't mean that you won't meet step 5. There are ways that we can develop the functional restrictions and limitations that you have because of your medical condition or conditions. I've introduced these concepts because during the course of this podcast, we're going to talk about these, and we're going to talk about these in great detail, and we'll give real life examples of how these have applied in particular cases. So we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to talk about that 5-step sequential evaluation in greater detail so that you understand that that is the disability test that Social Security is going to be using. 5 steps, the 5 ways that or things you need to meet to be entitled to your Social Security benefits. So let's take a break, and then we'll come back and educate you some more. Got it? All right.